your Chargers linebacker, Daiyan Henley, and you're tuning in with Chargers Unleashed.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Wolkenstein here with you from the LAFB Network. If this is your first time tuning in to the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Good morning, everyone. Happy Saturday. Great to see you all in the chat again. Once again, we are back live after a brief hiatus, as we said yesterday on the show. If you got a chance to catch our special interview with Brett Coleman, Dan Wolkenstein took a nice little vacation. The fingers were pointed, but Dan Wolkenstein has come back, taken accountability, and he is in full draft mode. Free agent frenzy right around the corner. All wheels up for Dan Wolkenstein. Let's go to work. We got a great show in store for you guys today. This is your show. There is so much a buzz right now in the NFL world with free agency just days away, with that being the last exit before the big road to the NFL draft come April 24th. Lots to get into as it relates to the Chargers, what they're going to do over the next few days and coming weeks, of course. Dan, doesn't it just make you excited?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm jazzed. I woke up this morning ready to rock. I can't believe free agent frenzy is already like a day away, although we're kind of already seeing things start trickling in. Live breaking news. Mike Gesicki, one of the tight ends that I was actually hoping the Chargers could go after, re-signed with the Cincinnati Bengals, so that is off the board. This is going to get fun. And Jake, fans, listeners, we're there. This is like where it gets moving. So let's have some fun. Give us your questions, comments, thoughts. Let's have some fun as we go through this one today. On docket, we have a couple voicemails to get to. We've also got lots of conversation around NFL draft strategy, around free agency strategy, some pickup points from our conversation with Brett Coleman. If you have not done so already, I know it just went live. Highly, highly recommend you use that as a teaser as you get ready for NFL free agency in the draft. Brett was incredible and kind of talked some truth into a lot of things Chargers fans have been talking about. But, Jake, before we get to that and all of the comments, it looks like, Matthew Dahl is one of the voicemails that we got. Matthew, we got you coming up soon, I promise. Jake, before we get to that, what are you drinking this morning? Folks in the chat, let me know what you're drinking. After that, let's pay the bills.
You know, originally, Dan, I was going to, and it's actually still in the refrigerator, I was going to have a Celsius to join the show, the usual caffeine kick. However, when I went to the gym this morning, I realized that I had run out of my pre-workout, which is my normal caffeine primer. So I had to go to the gym, get a C4 before my workout. And then I realized when I came back home, I shouldn't be having that much caffeine. So I'm already wired. I don't have anything. I'm ready to go. I'm assuming that you have something of the coffee variety, whether it's one of your world famous lattes that you, oh no. Okay. I thought you were going to make one of your,
it's a latte.
Oh, it is a latte.
Yep. Compliments on my wife this morning, actually. I woke up and she's like, I got coffee for you. I'm like, oh, the world is back. I feel wonderful.
Okay. Well, then we're ready to go.
All right. Talk about our friends.
Dramatic pause before BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline is every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. You think you know your stuff? Get in our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every single week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of up to $200K. When the game is over, head on over to our online casino and get on a game of blackjack or poker or on one with one of our 150 slot games. Head on over to the website today to get in on the action. BetOnline. The game starts here.
I love that the folks in the chat, longtime listeners, viewers, understand the dichotomy between the two of us. I roll out of bed. I look for a coffee. I drink some water, maybe brush my teeth. Jake's over here. By the time I'm doing that, already done with the workout, has his pre and post workout, went to the showers, read a book, thinking about his future. Yeah. And over here, Jorge, Jake over here mentioning the gym is such a flex when it's not even 9 a.m. Whatever, dude. Yeah, we know. You're jacked. You're ready to go. You're excited.
First of all, shut up. I have so many people that always send me pictures of Ryan Gosling from The Big Short or the little memes when he comes to him in Vegas when he meets with everybody. He's like, good, how was your morning? I've already went to the gym. I've had 2 poached eggs and I played blackjack with Miles Teller. And they're like, great, thank you for your diary.
Well, Jake, I'm to make you feel more awkward. Jorge wants to know, tell us your gym routine. You lift or tell us your secret, Jake.
We will save that for later or a different pod. Appreciate it. But needless to say, I still need to follow Ben Herbert's workout routine. Because that man's a nut.
Rich V, 5 a.m. gym club. Let's go. Jorge, last but not least. Jake wearing a shirt is him being modest. Amen. I love that the first 5 minutes of this is just about Jake being swole.
What in the hell did this show just go off the rails? Holy crap.
If Jake ever wants to have a good feeling in the morning and feel good about himself, just turn on a live show and wear his extra small t-shirt from Baby Gap and you'll feel fantastic.
Holy shit, Wolkenstein. All right, let's get to some Chargers news. And
Laus de Bruin, love the Brett interview. If they do draft another offensive line man in the first round, it better be a top 5 O-line next year. 4 first rounds in 5 years is a lot to invest otherwise. So, Jake, let's kind of start this thing off high level. NFL draft, free agency. Chargers got like $94 million at this current moment to spend. Some others possibly can make that money go up. But there's a lot of talk. And I've done some introspective thinking. I had to kind of check myself a little bit after talking to Brett yesterday. He talked about, and everyone's seen what happened with Philly versus the Chiefs and how they beat the brakes off of them and just bullied them into submission. And how did they do that? They did that with an insane offensive line and a defensive line that could rush 4 and just bulldoze their way to Super Bowl. Yes, they had pass catchers. Yes, they have a good quarterback. Obviously, they have a one-of-one running back. But the wise words of Brett Coleman, which I honestly thought was fantastic. The offensive line is the floor. The running back is the ceiling when it comes to your run game. Using that knowledge and using Jim Harbaugh being the guy who says offensive linemen are weapons. Offensive line at 22. I know Chargers fans might not like it. They didn't like it last year at first, and look how that played out. Jake, what do you mean? What do you think of the idea now, supplementing wide receiver in free agency and not spending on DK, which we'll get to a bunch of questions here, spending modestly in free agency, and then building the trenches in the draft?
Again, I go back to the Houston Texans game, and there's no way that you can argue with the front 4 that the Houston Texans had and what they did to the Chargers offensive line, specifically on the interior. Trey Pipkins, Bradley Bozeman, Zion Johnson had a very rough day that day. But it was evident. This wasn't like it was a surprise. This was an issue that was plaguing this team more times than not throughout the season. Sometimes the great play of Justin Herbert or great games by J.K. Dobbins, great games by the defense were able to mask those certain things. And the Chargers were able to overcome them. But when you get into the playoffs, and you go up against a defense like that, similar type of problem that what the Chiefs faced against the Eagles. You really saw that offensive line get exploited. So when you see something like that, there's no way that you can look at this and say that that's not a realistic possibility at 22 for what they need to do. And you could say it right now that the Chargers seemingly possibly need 3 in the interior. Whatever ends up happening with Zion Johnson, all this talk about him possibly flexing to center, we'll see what comes of that. If not, then you definitely need a center and a guard. And a guy like Gray Zabel, who could seemingly play any offensive line spot across the board, that's high value. And for a center class in general that has gone through so much flux from guys either returning to college, guys who end up suffering certain injuries throughout the year, and then value-wise, just depending on the athletic freaks, lack of starting time, it's really kind of set this center class in flux. And then you stand back to yourself and you say, is that going to be the guy that I'm going to trust going into their first year with Justin Herbert? So there is still a lot of question marks. So knowing that, that brings that sample size way down to maybe one or two individuals that you could say, yes, Jake Majors, who I'm a big fan of, you could find in the later rounds. Really like what Tate Ratledge did. And as we noticed from the combine, there were a handful of interior guys that were brought after the two groups were done that were brought on specifically to do center drills. There's so many question marks as it relates to how these offensive linemen are going to pan out. Now, flip coin of that, you look at free agency. The Bears have already gone out and they've done 2 trades to shore up their offensive line. We still don't know quite what the market is going to be in terms of the spending spree for offensive line. We would assume that the Chargers maybe are in play for one for what they're going to spend on. I know a lot of people have talked about Drew Dahlman, but I think with the trade market, the way that it's gone thus far, it's going to up his price tag. So you might end up being in a bidding war with other teams for that. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, but the priority for offensive line, and even as high as 22, I don't think you can ignore that at all.
Yeah, and I use the truck versus the trailer analogy in this as well for offensive line. And I think quarterback and offensive line is kind of the truck, the rest of the trailer for the offense. Like, you can have a great running back, i.e. Saquon in New York. It's only going to go so far if that truck isn't pushing it. Look at the offensive line. You then go to Philly. You see that offensive line, the truck through folks, the trailer, the running back, goes crazy on it. Say the quarterback. Quarterback can be the truck. It can drive most of your deficiencies. Other than that, everything else depends on those two. And so as much as, and it's fascinating, but as much as we, you, most Chargers fans, I'm not going to say all of them because some of them are smarter than us, have wanted the eye candy of the Malik Neighbors round 1, of whoever, Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers round 1, that elite pass catcher. Like, it all starts and stops literally with the offensive line. But I will say, Jake, it is interesting this go around. The appetite for that is so much bigger now than it was a year ago before the Joe Alt selection. I mean, just a year ago, people were adamantly against Chargers going offensive line. And I'm just kind of going through the chat here real quick. And there's a ton of folks who want offensive line in round 1. And so amazing what 1 year does. Jay, we have a ton of questions and comments here. So let's kind of roll through these to try to get a little up to date. Envy Talent, $5 donation. Thank you, Envy. Appreciate you. Morning, fellows. Just to switch it up on the 2 upcoming games, who do you want to blow out more, Houston or Jacksonville? Thanks for the content. Bolt up. I will say this one part. I'll let you finish it. I could care less about Jacksonville.
I was going to say Jacksonville is pretty much just blowing up right now as far as their roster goes. I mean, they're hitting a hard reset button for all of the contract releases that they are currently doing right now. But if you were to ask me, I think it would be more viable, maybe a more respected win if you were to go out and do that to the Houston Texans. However, that defense is good. DeMeco Ryans is a great coach. That's going to be a competitive game. So I wouldn't actually see a situation to where the Chargers would blow them out. But if you had to ask me between those two, I would lead in Houston because it's a more respectable win.
Agreed. Jorge Rodriguez with jokes. Quentin Johnston is a Tootsie Roll of eye candy. That's brutal.
Some people like Tootsie Rolls.
Remind you in another episode to go over Tootsie Roll versus Tootsie Roll and the amount of arguments I've gotten into with my wife and friends about which one is correct. Andre James was cut from the Raiders. Had a bad year last year, but 2 years ago, he was good. Jake, thoughts on Andre James as a free agent signing?
It's possible. I mean, again, I don't think that you look at any option off the table as it relates to free agent offensive linemen. You don't.
Yep.
And especially ones that are going to be in the interior spot when there's really so few that are viable. Yeah, you should definitely have your eyes open for that.
I love these live shows because we can get through 47 topics so fast. So rapid fire, it feels like already, and we're not even 15 minutes into the show. Let's just keep this thing rolling. Eddie says, if our Bolts let Khalil Mack walk, they better sign Eagles defensive end Josh Sweat. I'm very scared if they do that former. We all saw what the Bears put out about legacy in that video of Khalil Mack a few times. But, Jake, what's the avenue? If they let Khalil walk, now Joey's also gone, how does that change things?
Your whole free agent priority chart has changed. 100%. Letting Joey Bosa walk, which we all expected, given the cap hit and where he was at in his career and the production that has been unfortunate for him due to injuries that he has been able to put forth on the field. It was just time to move on. If you're not able to bring Khalil Mack back, as optimistic as I am with Tuli, you need to have something. So guys like Josh Sweat, a possibility of a Trey Hendrickson trade. Harold Landry, just yesterday, getting released and being a free agent. I heard there's a GM in the West that loves to pick up former Titans. So if that were to play out, your whole free agent priority is going to shift, in my opinion. I don't think that you can take away two big names like that from your edge class and say, oh yeah, we're just going to go and get this in the draft, which I am not opposed to, because I definitely think that the Chargers need to invest long-term in who you're going to pair with Tuli for the next 5 to 8 years. You need to eventually do that. But if it comes to this and Khalil Mack, for whatever reason, does not end up returning, you need to figure that out and figure it out quick.
Yep. Jake, one of the positives, there's a lot of positives about doing podcasts, but one of the negatives is people get on your shit about literally anything. And so we all have our, Jake-isms, Dan-isms, the things that we say cannot stop saying. Hanan Derry's calling us out. So as it relates to Hanan Derry, thank you. I want to put you on a podcast and see what you say all the time. But as it relates to this, Jake,
Jesus, this is great timing. I do a lot of presentations at my own work, and it was so funny because my boss and I mimic each other's, whether it's phrases that we say, our mannerisms, anything of that nature. And this was one that he actually brought up to me from something that I will say repetitively, or if I make a transition or certain things. I'm trying to kick it. If I say it too much and it offends anybody's sensibilities, I apologize. It's just who I am. It's just how I try to present things. But that's just me.
And folks in the chat, what are the isms that you have that drive yourself and others insane? What is mine, Jake? I'm sure I have a million. What's mine? What do I say all the time?
What do you say all the time? I'm not sure you necessarily have
other than interrupt you, because I do that a lot.
Well, I was gonna say that, but then until you said, what do I say a lot? I chose okay. Well, I said, well, I'm not gonna go there. So maybe that's just your thing. You interrupt.
Okay, I'll take it.
But you're working on it. I know you're working on it.
We're selfless here. Yeah, we're introspective. Totally, we're always trying to work it. No one's perfect. So here we are. Okay, let's get back to some of these questions. There's a question here, Davante or DK, that I wanted to get to. Sweet jumps. And this one, I've thought about this so many times. And I think I've come down to, I've learned my lesson last year on what I would do versus what this staff would do. What I would do, and it might not be the right thing, DK just sounds great for so many different reasons. He's younger. I think he's more explosive. I mean, he's jacked. You just think about
block.
He can block his ass off. You think about long-term, finally Justin Herbert gets his Robin. All of the things that DK can bring, incredible. And that eye candy is please give it to me. But that's not taken away from DK, from Davante, by the way. Anyone who says Davante's wash isn't good, stop. Davante is still probably a top 15 receiver, and he is miles better than anyone else on this Chargers team not named Ladd. So I think about all that, but then I go to what this front office and head coach philosophy is.
Put that hat on.
So I've learned to separate what I would do. What would Jim Harbaugh and Joe Ortiz do? Just replace the Jesus with Jim and Joe. Do you actually see them, A, spending 30 whatever million dollars on a receiver, and B, relinquishing draft capital to do so, when all they talk about is draft picks, comp formula, being responsible with their money, trying to build out the roster? Jake, you had talked about yesterday how Joe Ortiz talked about his philosophy of you build through the draft and you plug in holes in free agency.
That's it.
All of these go completely counter to the idea of going and getting DK. So what do I think the staff would do? It's not DK. Do they have a shit ton of money that they could go get DK? Sure. But do I see them allowing money and comp picks and regular picks go? No. It kind of pains me. But Jake, talk about what Brett had said yesterday about like the actual importance or the dirty little secret about that premier X receiver in today's game.
Yeah, his percentage in terms of throws to number one targets in man coverage only happens, I can't remember the percentage, but it was low throughout the entirety of a game in terms of how you want to prioritize that. And this was him in the midst of talking about why his value, especially in the view of Jim Harbaugh, is bigger as it relates to the trenches and getting that floor established first, as opposed to what you would want out of a wide receiver. Let me go back to the quote that actually Joe Ortiz had said, more context for this from the combine, because this is specifically what he said. And I think this is something that we need to keep in mind as free agency is just a couple days away. This is what he said. Use free agency to fill out your roster, to supplement your roster, to go get something you need. But the two play hand in hand. But I don't think that you make decisions in free agency and then plan to adjust accordingly in the draft. You want to be able to draft the best player available and help the team, because the draft is a 4 or 5 year solution when you pick a player. Free agency is not always that. Last year, we signed a bunch of 1-year deals. Some deals aren't as long. Stay draft centric and use for agency to build around it.
It's that last part.
Yes.
Repeat that last sentence again.
Some deals aren't as long. Stay draft centric and used for free agency to build around it. Now, if we know a few things already from Joe Ortiz, is that he loves playing the long game and acquiring additional draft picks to do so, whether it's comp picks or from a trade or anything of that nature. So if you're following that type of mentality, then using draft capital to go get DK may seem like that situation's out the window. However, you could also make the argument that DK Metcalf, who is younger than Davante Adams, you have his former wide receiver coach and Sanjay Lal there for connective tissue going back to Sanjay's days in Seattle, where arguably was DK's most productive season that he's had since he's been in the NFL. Would it make sense? Hell yeah, it would. And at the same time, Davante Adams, from a more short-term standard, maybe around the same type of money just for the first 2 years, but for a short-term solution, that might be a route that they want to go. Here's what I'll say on this. The Chargers tried during the trade deadline to acquire more wide receivers for Justin Herbert and this team, given the output outside of Ladd McConkey, which was not that good. We all know this. They tried trading for Quentin Johnston, didn't get it. The Baltimore Ravens got him. And then, surprisingly, a few weeks later when the Baltimore Ravens released him, the Chargers tried to get him again, and then were sniped by the Houston Texans because they had one higher waiver priority than them. I think that they're going to look at every single possible option. I don't think that anything is off the table. But if you go by that quote that Joe Hortiz said, it would sound like to me that whether it's Davante Adams or any other free agent wide receiver currently, it leads me to believe that that is the route that they would go.
Yeah. and it's interesting. You know, a lot of people, we hear this, but F it. I still want DK, says Brad. And I get it. And I think that's the difference between what we would do, what we want, what we're used to, what we're hoping for Justin and company, what we've noticed has been a glaring issue for this team for so long, and this new regime, and what their philosophy is, and what they're trying to do in terms of building a bully. Now, you could argue DK Metcalf is kind of a bully on the outside. He is. But in the style that they want to play, realistically, how often is DK, with Lad, mind you, going to be utilized in a game versus an offensive line? And because of that, are you willing to spend $35 million for 4 years or whatever? Or maybe you go Davante for 1 or 2 years. Maybe it's $20 million per. You have the money to do it. You're still saving whatever $10, $15 million you can use to invest in other things. And you could argue that that's probably the more financially responsible thing to do. And I think Chargers fans aren't going to like this. And I realized this when we were talking to Brett, Jake, was as much as we don't want to admit it, this is not taking shots to other people on this Chargers team right now. But I don't think this Chargers team needs a bona fide a bona fide X, cost them 30, 35 million plus, or, that top tier one of the draft. What they need is a competent X receiver. Competent. Like one that can go up and get it when you give it to him, but he doesn't have to be the number one because you already got Lat. So they need someone to stretch the field. You need a competent boundary receiver. Who would that be? And that's the value, the surplus value that they're looking for. Yes, they have like $100 million. But the way this staff operates, seemingly, is they'd rather spend $100 million, on 15 players than spend it on 3. Because the odds of you hitting on 15 are way higher than hitting on 3.
I also go back to one little anecdote that Hortiz has said. He wants to be responsible with Mike. Doesn't mean that he doesn't want to spend, but he wants to make sure that he's bringing in the right guys. We all saw the last time that the Chargers had this much cap space just a few years ago, and how many of those free agents that Tom Telesco brought in were true return on investments. It wasn't a lot. Not a lot at all. So you don't want to find yourself in another position where the years afterwards, you're once again cap strapped and find yourself in another free agent period where you can't really do anything to improve your team. And I don't think that that's Hortiz's goal. Is he willing to spend money? I do think he is. But he's got, I think, a short list of guys in a certain priority order in terms of what he's going to look at. And mind you, this is still March 8th. Between now and Monday and the weeks that are going to follow that, rosters around the NFL are going to change. You're going to see some names that are going to become available that maybe some people did not expect. Hell, between now and training camp, that's still going to happen. So keep in mind that the Chargers, I think Joe Hortiz, from what he learned in Baltimore, is all about playing the long game, but it's the long game that's ultimately going to pay off. Keep that in mind.
Let's go to a couple of super chats before getting to our first voicemail, Jake. Fabian, $5 donation. Thank you, Fabian. Is it a good pick for O-line in the first round? It is a good pick, for O-line in the first round. But do you guys think it's better to go tight end or running back if we don't re-sign JK?
Well, I think with the news, let's just say hypothetically, you don't bring back JK. which I still think they do. Yeah, Gus Edwards was released yesterday. That'll certainly change things as it relates to the running back room, because that essentially just leaves you with what, Kamani Vidal. I think that Omari and Hampton would definitely fix that problem. But I do think that they're going to bring JK back. I think he's earned that contract. I know that from what we've heard from Joe Ortiz, that they've had positive conversations thus far. When you heard JK at the end of the season, he definitely wanted to be back in the Chargers locker room. And I still believe that while Greg Roman's idea of what the running game was going to be last year, when you had the running back stable that you had, the execution just wasn't there. Gus Edwards didn't do the things that he was brought in to do. Unfortunately, he was battling some nagging injuries throughout the year. And when he was on the field, it wasn't really anything that you could hitch your wagon to say, yes, that was the guy. Let's run with it, especially when J.K. Dobbins was out for that 4-game stretch. We don't know what Kamani Vidal is. I still believe that they're going to go with a running back by committee style, which is why everything leads to me to believe that they're going to bring J.K. Dobbins back. You're going to draft a running back in this class, whether it is at 22 or in the later rounds, to build out that strength of your team. As far as tight end goes, everything changes if Colson Loveland's on the board. I am not shy in talking about my admiration for Colson Loveland. Obviously, if Tyler Warren was there, it'd be a whole different story, but he's most likely not getting to 22. Colson Loveland makes a ton of sense just being back with Harbaugh in this type of an offense. It gives Justin Herbert a tight end presence that he has not had since Hunter Henry. But you could also look a little bit later on day 2 for a guy that could come in and be a great move/inline tight end who's great at receiving, good at blocking, and find a middle ground. There's plenty of possibilities here. If you were to ask me right now what would be the higher priority as it currently stands, I would actually say tight end, honestly. And that's me believing that JK is going to come back, and that at some point in time, whether it's day 1 or 2, that the Chargers will prioritize selecting another running back to round out that group. But yeah, a tight end weapon, the likes of Colston Loveland or an Aurora or a Gunnar Helm, sure. You need some of that in that offense. I think you're going to want to kick Will Dissly back to what's brought him to the dance, and that's his blocking. You need another tight end of that nature that's going to be a move tight end and give Justin Herbert another option in the middle of the field.
I have a question, Jake, and someone mentioned Louser Brew, and a LeBron tweet from the Chargers. Do you have any, let me pull this up so if you can see it. Do you have any idea what this is referencing? I'm slow, so I don't. What is this referencing? It says, first of all, anyone? I'm slow. I'm old. You know, Jake?
Is this supposed to be like one of those like psychological reverse tweets?
I don't know.
Who put this up?
The Chargers did. This is the Chargers tweet.
I'm slow. I'm old. That's what it says?
No, it says first of all, right here.
First of all. Oh. I don't know.
Folks in the chat, if you're smarter than us, if you're more hip than us, please let us know what this is about. I'd love to know. Jake, first voicemail. Actually, wait, hold on. Before we get the voicemail, let's do our last super chat. Is Jared Wilson a generational center prospect?
Saying generational at this point in time when he hasn't even taken an NFL snap is a big word. Now, for a guy who's had 1 year of production, sat behind Cedric Van Pran there in Georgia, is undoubtedly an athletic freak as it relates to an interior offensive line being the center position. He could definitely be your answer. Whether it's Gray Zabel or Jared Wilson, I 100% believe that those two guys would come in and be staples for the center position for the Chargers, and you need a long-term solution for that. You haven't had any stabilization at that role since Corey Linsley. You need to find a long-term solution for how you're going to build out your offensive line. And yeah, I definitely believe that either one of those guys would be able to do it.
All right. First one, Jake. Voicemail. Again, if you have not called in, please feel free. 323-902-7586. No gatekeeping here. Anyone is welcome to call in at any time. 30-second voicemail. Happy to respond to your topic or question. First voicemail, Jake. Let's see what the voicemail sounds like on the Chargers Unleashed hotline.
Hey guys, just a few comments or questions. So with Zion possibly moving to center, does that mean Tyler Booker has probably entered into the BPA conversation? Assuming, Kenneth Grant and Colson Loveland are off the board. And one more comment. If Jared Wilson's available in the second round, do you take him because he had a pretty historical combine performance? So yeah, thanks. Bye.
Real quick, Jorge says I can
hey
feel
guys,
that voicemail breathing
few
on me.
comments or questions.
So we touched on the Jared Wilson topic. Obviously, if that was an option there in the second round, yes, or second day, whatever it ends up being, yes, I would pull the trigger on that. Historical great combine for an interior offensive lineman. You saw Membo stand up when Jared Wilson ran his second 40, just like that was everybody's face at that point in time. As far as Tyler Booker goes, now you're talking about two sides of coin. If you were to just judge it off the combine alone, where you have Jared Wilson putting up elite numbers and Tyler Booker not having the best athletic performance. But if you go back and you watch his film, that's not really been his game. He's going to beat people in short yardage situations. He's going to beat people in a phone booth. He can be that mauling type of offensive guard. But I'll say this. If we were to take an indicator from the reason that Joe Alt was selected, not just from the standpoint of that everybody knew that he was the best offensive tackle in the league, but it's a combination of tape and athleticism that really solidified that. And you see that in his play. I believe that the Chargers are going to value both as it relates to selecting interior offensive linemen. So while I love Tyler Booker's tape, and I would hope that whether it's the Chargers or anybody else, that he's able to come in and have a very productive career. If I'm putting my Joe Ortiz hat on and knowing what I just drafted in Joe Alt, I think he's going to have the same type of value as it relates to building out that interior. So that means that's the Gray Zables of the world. That's the Jared Wilsons of the world. There was plenty of interior offensive linemen, especially in that group 2 of the combine, who really upped their draft stock. So I'm going to put a little bit more stock into the athletic traits of the offensive linemen on top of them having good tape.
Hanan Derry, our offensive line is not ready for Omarion unless the plan is to sign 2 starting interior offensive line, draft interior offensive line on day 2 and 1 on day 3. So this is a good point. And I caution folks who are, and there's a certain truther out there that's probably thinking the otherwise, but it's okay. A great running back is only going to take you so far if your offensive line is trash. And they've got 2 great tackles, but you would rather have your offensive line figured out than add in your missing running back to let that thing fly. Your offensive line is the floor. Your running back is the ceiling. Again, going back to what Brett said yesterday, your running back is only as good as the offensive line. Sure, he can make lemons look like lemonade at sometimes, but on the grand scheme of things, you need that offensive line to work. So could the Chargers go Omarion Hampton in round 1? Yes. And then go get offensive line starters in 2, 3, 4 or whatever.
Yes, they could.
Absolutely. That's clearly a way. Could they go get a guard center combo in free agency to let this thing be easier for them in the draft? Sure. But just getting Omarion Hampton for the goal of fixing your running game is not going to work this year. It will not work. It might look a little better, but you're not going to optimize the results if it's just that as your answer.
I always go back to when LT had his record-breaking season in 2006. When he went in there and had the opportunity to go in for that record-breaking touchdown that he got against Denver, we all know what he said in the huddle before he did it. If I get in there, I want everybody to come in there and celebrate with me, because he knew that it wasn't just Lorenzo Neal making holes for him. He knew how valuable that offensive line was. And that was probably the last time that the Chargers offensive line was that dominant with that group of five that you had.
Yep.
But to put it in relative terms for what, Dan, you said Brett was talking about, that Eagles offensive line has been good for a number of years. Them signing Saquon was just the absolute cherry as it relates to their run game. And when you take a talent like that and put it with that offensive line, not only is that a genius move, you make your division rivals in the New York Giants look silly for releasing him.
100%.
And then you get a Super Bowl out of it. There's almost a part of me now that wishes that, again, context is 2020, but there's a part of me now that wishes, damn, I wish they hadn't sat him for that last week.
I know, break the record.
Just to get an opportunity to break that record, because that would have been great. So, and to once again pile on from what Brett Coleman said, Daniel Jeremiah said this exact same thing when the running backs were out there doing drills. Because Rich Eisen had asked him, how do you maximize it as it relates to the value of a running back for free agency or the draft in general? And he said the first thing that you need is that your team needs to be ready for it in order to maximize every touch that your running back gets. Now, this is not to devalue the running back position. But if you are a team and your offensive line is in shambles and you invest in a high round pick and a running back, you're not going to get the same type of production as you would if that offensive line was more established. See Detroit Lions, see Philadelphia Eagles. And hell, for a period of time, see Kansas City Chiefs. It didn't matter, but they were able to run block and they were able to get productive yards out of it. So there's not one way to shear a sheep, but in terms of maximizing the value, there are certain things that need to be in place beforehand.
Yeah, and I will, last thing on the running game, it's easy to pick and choose your spots to be like, oh, see, that's why the running back needs to get paid. You need to go for a high-end running back and blah, 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 all that stuff, right? The Chiefs just won how many AFC titles and Super Bowls? And who was their running back? They literally had a 7th-round running back chugging for them. They won because their interior offensive line was incredible. And they had a god for quarterback and coach. That's how they won. Add in the defensive coach, add in Travis Kelce, sure. It wasn't the running game it wasn't the running back who got them over the hump. Like, that wasn't it. And I'd argue it wasn't Saquon that got that team winning a Super Bowl last year. It was the fact that they could do whatever they want. I.e., look at the tush push. Like, there's nothing that people can do. So, like, again, truck versus trailer. You need to have that line before your running back can do really anything, or else he's only going to be so good. Friend of the show, Jake, the director, Trench Warfare, 100%. I'm with you. Jorge, when is Jake not right? Ooh, we're gassing Jake up this morning. Jake is absolutely right.
No, I am wrong on plenty of things. Trust me when I say on that. I am wrong on plenty of things, and that is shown.
There was a quote or a comment here that I wanted to bring up that talks about the strategy of this team so far in the offseason with what they've done for their signings. There it is. Eddie, so far, great Bolts business. They cut Joey Bosa. Again, save $25 million. They cut Gus Edwards. I think it was save $3.1 million. They re-signed Elijah Molden, which was a fantastic. That was, in my opinion, that was priority 1A, 1B with Khalil Mack for this defense. Now, do they cut Trey Pipkins? Do they re-sign JK and Khalil? Poona Ford? I don't know. But yeah, I would re-sign JK, re-sign Khalil and Poona, And hell, go for Tyler Tart as well. What do you make of the Trey Pipkins thing? He's making a lot of money, and you can shed a lot of cap space with very little dead cap if you got rid of him this year. You like to have the insurance. I'm not sure how much of an insurance that is for that much money when you already got a Jamari Sawyer who can kind of be your swing guy. So yeah, if it was me, no offense to Trey, but if business is business, like I probably would save whatever it is, $7, $8, $9 million in the cap and cut Trey. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, his contract's up after last season. And remember, before this regime, or next season, excuse me, before this regime came in, Trey didn't have the best year either prior to. So you kick him into guard. You try to see how that'll work. You put him next to Joe Alt. Unfortunately, the guard project doesn't work very well either. I personally think that it's about a 95% chance that the Chargers would walk away from this.
Or restructure, one of the two.
Possibly.
They roughly save $7 million if they cut.
I just lean to going back to that Houston game, and that being just the short sample size of what the problem was last year. I think the Trey Pipkins project being now used at multiple different positions, again, the only chance that I would say that maybe they give it one more season, as you said, is the insurance of having it. Now, does that mean that Jamari Sawyer comes in and outplays him and overtakes the starting position? Maybe it does. Does that mean that Trey Pipkins is still back at right guard next season? Maybe it does. But I think just given that you didn't see any improvement from him going to tackle to guard was enough of an indicator. And we'll see. I could totally be wrong on this. They may end up keeping him, but my gut is telling me that you move forward with it. But you think about the flip side of that. If you do that, that's now 2, maybe 3, possibly offensive line positions that you have to fill. Do you want to do that? Because that's a big ask in one season.
You're not wrong. Again, 323-902-7586 is the number for the Chargers Unleashed hotline. The second voicemail, Jake, let's hear what they have to say on today's live show.
Jake, Dan, gentlemen, morning, y'all. How you doing? Just want to say next week's going to be a big week with free agency. Just curious, for me, in my opinion, I like DK Metcalf, but to be honest, I don't think we should trade a second round, third round pick for him, too much draft picks. George Hughes will be doesn't like that. So my best option is Davante Adams. But I don't want to know that, do you think do you think that Greg Roman, can he make Davante Adams better? Because Greg Roman as offensive coordinator, he's pretty good at running the ball, but also passing the ball, I just don't feel like he can do it or not. So I don't know. I feel hesitant, with Greg Roman. Can he make Davante Adams better or anything like that? So, but let me know what you guys think. Thank you guys both up, and as always, fuck the Raiders. Thank you. Bye.
What a sign off. Love it. So let me get back to the first part of that question. Again, we've already talked about Davante and the DK situation here a lot. As far as Davante making the team better, I think it's 100% a yes.
Yep.
If you have reservations about, whether it's DK or Davante or any other big name wide receiver, why would it matter? Because that's not Greg Roman's offense. I invite you to go back and look at the games following the first Bronco game. After the bye week. So if I remember the time, earlier, it was right after the Chargers had their loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. From that game moving forward, obviously you have some one-offs being the Atlanta game and, maybe one other. That offense took a shift from where it was through those first 4 games because it was J.K. Dobbins' team against the Raiders and against the Panthers those first 2 weeks. But after that bye week, you see something shift in Greg Roman's offense where more of an emphasis is put on Justin Herbert and allowing him to do the things that he does best. Davante Adams, I don't care if it's Greg Roman's offense, Roman Gregory's offense, whatever the hell it is, he's going to make this offense better, and they're going to find a way to utilize him. It's the same argument that you could say for DK and the pieces that you put around it. And I feel like we're almost just keep going back to Philly in this situation. But when you have A.J. Brown and you have Saquon Barkley and you have Jalen Hurts and you have those type of pieces that make your offense multiple, and you have a head coach that can figure out a way to make it work, you get that. So whether it's Davante or DK paired up with whatever running back stable that the Chargers end up creating, you're going to be able to make something happen. So if they actually do go out there and sign or trade for said player, they're going to have a plan in place for it. I guarantee you.
The director says lots of tackles drafted this year will play guard. Chargers love the position swap dance. And again, we heard from Brett Coleman. We've seen, you've looked at it, the draft in terms of prospects. There's a lot of interior guys that can be starters day 1, day 2, even day 3.
Yep.
And so I believe this Chargers team is set up nicely with the positions that they need for the most part are deep in this draft, aside from wide receiver, at least at the top. But you look at interior offensive line, you look at running backs, you look at tight ends a bit, secondary, all of those, edge, interior defensive line, stacked. And that's exactly what the Chargers need. So you got 10 picks and counting. Yeah, they're looking pretty good there. Jake, we've gotten this long. You know what we haven't heard yet?
Dramatic pause was for.
Should we do it one more time? Because I'm so jazzed.
Do it again. I swear I need that. I think I have told myself to do that previously, but I need to put that as like the new alarm on my phone because I need to wake up to that every single day. It's a beautiful thing.
Yep. Nick says Jim Harbaugh believes in a great offensive line. It'll be fixed.
Yep.
Agreed. So Mike Gesicki, I don't know if people saw it, re-signed this morning with the Cincinnati Bengals. There is a bunch of questions and comments here earlier in the chat about the tight end scenario for the Chargers, whether they go get a Juwan Johnson. I personally love the Evan Ingram idea. I floated, I don't think the Raiders would ever do this, but Michael Mayer traded over here would be nice. You got Colson Loveland, I think would be dream scenario if they went for the draft. Jake, how do you see them going? Tight end. Do you see them going free agency or targeting the draft? Not what we would do, but again, what they would do. I know.
Again, I don't want to make it seem like I'm copping out of the question, but I still think that you're going to look at both sides of the spectrum as it relates to either the draft or free agency. You went out last year and you signed 2 free agent tight ends. With the ones that are available now, I definitely think that the Chargers are going to give them a look, whether it's Juwan Johnson, Evan Ingram, whoever's out there. The tight end free agent market's getting thin, so you're probably going to be up against a little bit more bidders. But I do think that you need to find your tight end to pair with the future. And this is one of the better tight end classes, in my opinion, that's come out. And as it relates to a tight end that's going to be able to do the things that Jim Harbaugh wants them to do in his offense, you can find that in this draft. And whether it's the Colston Lovelands of the world or Elijah Aroro or Gunnar Helm or Ferguson, whatever it ends up being, I think all 4 of those guys just off the top of the cap would be great options for what it is that the Chargers need in terms of a move tight end. But again, not to sound like a broken record, I think that they'll look at both options.
I'm with you. Jake, what are your thoughts? There's a lot of people in the chat asking for maybe a mock draft. Do you want to do a mock draft here? Or let's save it for the next one.
Let's save that one for the next one.
Okay.
Let's build some anticipation for that.
I'm with you.
Because I would like to put a little bit more juice behind a mock draft bring in a little bit more drama to it whenever Dan and I get up to
And
making our respective picks. And yes, more time, which obviously leads to the drama of things. So shotgun mocks, I don't think we're quite ready for yet. But I will say this. I promise on a live show between now and April 24th, someone calls out a shotgun mock, we'll do a shotgun mock. Promise.
Yep. Laus de Bruin, wouldn't mind them trading down and getting extra picks. Love Brett's insights. Again, if you have not seen Brett's episode last night, highly recommend prior to start of free agent frenzy and the draft stuff. Not much difference between picks. I think it was like 18, 15-ish and 60. So there's like a bunch, there's some, maybe a handful, 10 to 15, like blue chip dudes, first round grades. But then after that crop of 40, 50 players, there's not much difference in skill. So trade back from 22, maybe you do, I don't know, in the late 20s, early 30s, pick up another one. Like, yeah, why not? And that's one of the benefits of having a bunch of draft picks, B, a coaching staff and front office that's very good at scouting, and C, if you have a ton of money in free agency that you can help build out and fill in holes at your roster, like you can kind of just go BPA. And when you can do multiple BPA instead of one with all roughly the same quality, yeah, sign me up. Sign me up. Rich V says, I think we're going shopping for guards on Monday. No way you can tell me you're a physical team and not upgrade. I think he means the offensive line. And Jake, this reminds me of an issue I had with the previous regime. And this isn't a shot at them philosophically, but it's them not adjusting to what they actually had. You heard Brandon Staley and company talk about like that same methodology of, being physical up front and being able to dominate the opposing teams and, all of those euphemisms, but they weren't. But they did not have those dudes in their roster. And then they didn't adjust accordingly. You're hearing the same thoughts from Jim Harbaugh and company about, tip with the spear, offensive line as a weapon, building a bully, trench warfare, all of that stuff.
I will take every awkward quote from Jim Harbaugh over anybody who goes with the traditional route of being physical, this, that, and the other, because he's proven that that's what he means and that's what he's going to do. And this has long been the reputation of Jim Harbaugh as it relates to his college days of coaching, his time with the 49ers, his time in Michigan. I don't care if he comes off awkward or says some of these weird catchphrases that people will just gravitate towards. It doesn't matter because he knows what he wants to do. He has a plan to execute it. He knows what he values. And at the end of the day, whether it sounds like some alphabet soup, it doesn't matter. He's going to make it work. He's already done that. So, yes, going back to the original question in terms of upgrading the offensive line, he's going to do it. He and Joe Ortiz know that whether we're talking about from an offensive line standpoint, skill position standpoint, they even said it themselves. They failed Justin Herbert. They did not put him in a position to succeed where he should have been. And you better believe with this cap space and this draft capital that you have right now that you're going to do it.
Nick says, sign Ingram or Juwan Johnson and draft another tight end. Jake, if it was me, no, scratch that. If I'm putting my head on if I'm
keep the helmet
on and Jim Harbaugh, I don't see them drafting signing at the top of the market. Those premier guys. Like, I just don't, maybe they'll surprise me, but they've told us who they are unapologetically for years now. And everyone thinks that they're, posturing, but no, that's just who they are. That's what they do. Primarily, they don't do that stuff. So Juwan Johnson, I could see. I'm not sure what Ingram's market's going to be. I don't know, honestly, but it's a position that you don't have to pay $30 million plus, whatever. Juwan Johnson sounds like one of those stopgap type guys, like younger, relationship with Justin Herbert, Like, I think he has the traits that I think the Chargers team needs. But so does Colson Loveland, obviously. There's a couple tight ends in this draft that would be fantastic additions to the Chargers team. What do you think they would do for the tight end group? Is it both?
Like I said, I think that they'll look at both. Now, if you want to, I mean, I do agree with your idea that I don't believe that they're going to be in play for some of the top market guys if you look at certain positions. But as it relates to this tight end free agency group, I think that would be one of the bigger possibilities that they could be in play for 100%. And whether it is Juwan Johnson or at Evan Ingram, you need to set Justin Herbert up with a tight end that he has not had since the days of Hunter Henry. You need to find that. And you need to have that for a number of years. So whether it is free agency or the draft, how many years have we been talking about it back when Tom Telesco was in charge? A couple years ago when the tight end class was looking good, that you could have taken one and you didn't. Yeah, you've been able to band-aid it for a number of years, sure, but that hasn't been the most productive option. That hasn't helped your offense. You need to find not only a productive option, but one that's going to sustain more than one season.
Yep. Chris says we should all be tired of seeing Herbert get whacked every single play. Agreed.
No argument there.
Eddie's going back to work. He says, I got to go back to work. Later, Bolt fan. Dan Jakes, thanks for answering 2 of my questions. You are welcome. I missed the evil that we're referring to, but don't put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby. I missed something there.
Director with some Talladega Night quotes.
Apparently we got Fitness smoking something. Okay, I'm clearly behind on the chat because there's
you got to catch up.
Shots fired. Let's see. Hollywood Brown re-signed by the Chiefs for $11 million. Guess
up
that's
to
breaking news.
Up to $11 million, I guess, is what they ended up coming out saying. So who knows the incentives for that? But hey, the Chiefs had to have some good wide receiver news this morning. So,
yep. Can we talk about that for a second? By the way, I mean, they got the Rashee Rice thing, and they got Xavier Worthy. Like, that's bad look. At some point, certain things become a trend. It's just weird when it happens recurrently with the same team over and over again. Yeah, Ortiz's only blemish last year was not drafting a center last year with such a deep class. I'd argue you could probably put tight end in there too. But again, you can't fix Rome in a day.
Still surprised they didn't take a center.
Yep. Alski says, go get Elijah Arroyo. Gunnar Helm's another name that you heard. We all saw kind of what happened with him and the ankle and him pushing through all of it. Jake, we have another voicemail that came in as we're on the show.
Love it.
Let's hear it.
What's going on, Chargers Unleashed? You guys are bringing up some pretty solid points regarding the offensive line. Totally agree with you guys. The director clearly said trench warfare. Chiefs win Super Bowls with their solid O-line. So maybe going after a couple of free agents. And maybe I really don't, Trey Pipkins has been like a 50-50 top offensive lineman. There's a lot of them that can be picked up in the free agency and also in the NFL draft. A lot of young offensive linemen that are hungry and ready to roll. Let me know what you guys think, but totally agree with you guys. Offensive line is probably, again, interior offensive line would probably be the number one thing I would address. After that, running back class is deep, tight end class is deep, defensive line class is deep, and just go crazy in the draft. Thank you, guys.
Don't disagree with it at all. In terms of just the priorities, once again, offensive line is going to be high, whether it's free agency or the draft. Draft's going to be a crapshoot depending on who's going to end up being there, and whether we're talking about the Kenneth Grants of the world or the Lovins of the world or the Zabels of the world. The Chargers are going to have a tough choice at 22. Honestly, the way that the board shapes out now, obviously, is going to be very different by the time that we hit April 24th. But if you just think of it in terms of a ballpark of 5 players, it's going to be a tough decision at 22. So again, I go back to what we started the show with. Let's see what happens with this free agency class of offensive linemen, because the guard market in general is interesting, and I think it's going to grow between now and middle of next week. You're going to see a few more names that are going to become available. As it stands right now, everybody has their top 2 or their top 3 in terms of the guards that are out there. But again, you're going to get in a bidding war as it relates with other teams, because other teams need those interiors. The Chargers aren't the only team that's going to try to follow the Philadelphia Eagles blueprint in terms of having a good offensive line. So how are you going to contend with that? You got the money to do it, which gives you the leg up in that circumstance. But the Chargers can do this in a variety of different ways. So I'm fascinated, honestly, now to see Joe Ortiz, in his own words, make responsible signings, not cheap signings, but responsible signings that are going to not only be productive, but set his team up as it relates to filling some of those gaps that you need to supplant, that you build the draft out for another 4 to 5 year type of a move.
Real quick, we have a live discussion here. The director calls.
Oh, good Lord. I love this.
Oh, maybe not. Oh, I
He's
think he's trying to do a voicemail. He's trying.
Okay.
We'll give him time. We got about 10, 15 minutes here before we get out of here. If not, we'll have him on the voicemail for the next conversation. Jay, we didn't talk about this yet. Before I go, Bolt family, who fears the Raiders trading for quarterback Geno Smith? I don't. What'd you make of that?
I think the story as it came about in general was more interesting than the move itself, because Seattle was working on extension conversations with Geno Smith earlier this week. That ended up falling apart. And in the midst of that, I can't remember who, I think it was Seattle that originally had called Vegas. And they were trying to put together a trade package that involved Max Crosby, to which the Raiders just immediately hung up the phone and said, absolutely no way is that happening. Mm-hmm. And that essentially sparked the negotiations from there. And then we find out that Geno Smith is the new quarterback, reuniting with his old coach and Pete Carroll in Las Vegas. And ironically enough, it was the 3rd round pick that the Raiders were given for the Davante Adams trade from the New York Jets that ended up securing that trade. Look, for Geno Smith, I think it's a great situation. It's familiar with a head coach. It sets the Raiders up now. Here's what I would probably say that worries me about this more so. It's not so much Geno Smith. It's now what Geno Smith now affords the Raiders to do. Because at number 6 overall, now that the Raiders have seemingly gotten their quarterback, you best believe that the Asante conversations are going to start at number 6 overall. 1,000%, because now that Carroll has his quarterback, he's going to look for his version of beast mode in Las Vegas. And it would not shock me in the least now if Asante ends up going that high at 6.
Yeah. Geno Smith's a good quarterback, but I don't think he's top tier. I think he's kind of another stopgap quarterback, in my opinion, but he's better than who they've had. So, yeah, I mean, they got a quarterback, which is good. You'll take that. Okay, Jake, got our voicemail. Friend of the show.
Did he finally get in?
Yeah. This is live TV, baby.
All right.
Let's see what we got to say. Friend of the show, director calling in.
Kia ora. It's your buddy, director. Hey, how's it going? Hey.
I love how he starts. Hey, how's it going?
Like episode of South Park.
I had a quick inquiry for you guys. A quick question. A quick scenario that has been rolling around in my mind for a while. Chase Young to the Chargers. We've been so good at taking some guys on defense and bringing their careers back, turning back the clock, finding hidden potential. It's been on my mind a lot. What if we had a young guy who maybe hasn't lived up to that hype, hasn't lived up to potential? Tried him out for a couple of years. Yes, maybe a little bit more expensive than some other, guys that we could bring in. But maybe that could be the answer for a long-term edge post Khalil Mack. What do you guys think about that? I've been driving, thinking about it. I've been sitting watching TV thinking about it. I've been reading the Holy Bible and have to stop myself and think about what if Chase Young was a future Charger and answer at edge for the foreseeable future. Love you guys. Big love, Jake. Big love, Daiyan. You guys have a good one.
Stay frosty. You can clearly see what's been on director's mind for a period of time. If this doesn't end up happening, I need to call him, because with this much thinking about it, I'm afraid he might be devastated if this does not end up coming to fruition for the Chargers. To be honest, Dan, I have not given much thought. Not nearly as much thought as director has. That's next level with Chase Young on the brain. You still have Bud Dupree under contract for one more year. Who knows what's going to end up coming to that? Obviously, you have Tuli. The big domino here is going to be Khalil Mack. If Khalil Mack wouldn't return, like we started the show, I think that edge priority goes arguably to number one, whether it's free agency or the draft. You can make an argument for that. And you would have to be forced to find, whether it's a stopgap replacement, whether we are talking about guys like a Chase Young or trading for a Trey Hendrickson or a guy like Harold Landry, or you try to fix that in the draft. It's definitely going to become a much bigger priority if Khalil Mack does not end up returning. Chase Young coming to this team. If you can get the same type of reclamation production that you got out of guys like J.K. Dobbins and Tyre Tart and Poona Ford,
Elijah Molden.
If
Christian
you could tell me that was going to happen, I mean, it's a good problem. I mean, it's a good track record thus far to see that. And I'm sure that Jesse Minter, we know how much Jesse Minter loves his edge rushers and getting after the quarterback. I would entertain it. I would entertain it.
Yeah, I think I would too. I mean, it's a good, I hadn't thought about it before, but it's in line with what this front office did last year, where you look for, and I think Daniel Popper mentioned this a couple days ago, but like this front office, at least last year, continuously looked for players that they can get surplus value out of. So guys that they can buy low before they go off, infuse them with this coaching staff and this scheme, let them go crazy, and then help them get paid either here or elsewhere. We all know Chase Young had all of the attributes in the world. And if there's a coaching staff that can get more out of him, it's probably this one. And allow, someone like Khalil Mack to stay with him and kind of mentor him. Absolutely. I could see it. And yeah, you could probably get Chase Young for a hell of a lot cheaper than some of the other free agents that are out there. Yeah, sign me up for it. I'm good. That'd be a great depth piece for sure. If you told me that you let go of Joey Bosa, saved $25 million, brought in Chase Young for, I don't know what the price would be, but maybe
he's not going to be top end of the market.
No, not at all.
You already know that.
Yeah, I would do it. You probably save $15 million with that swap. Yeah, Tuli, Mack, Chase Young, sure. Again, that opens up the draft a ton. And you're not spending top dollar. Like, that's a value surplus idea. Yeah, I'm good. What about Harold Landry, Jake?
If Mack doesn't come back, like I said, you should be considering all options for edge, whether it is a short-term Band-Aid or making it one of your highest priorities in the draft to address. But the Mack domino has to fall first in order to figure this out.
Sleep Frequencies says, we have the money and brains to figure out running back and offensive line this year. We have the money and brains to figure out running back. So it sounds like he's saying
money to address. I'm gonna assume that this is what he's talking about. Money to address the offensive line in free agency. Bring back J.K. Dobbins and supplement and build depth beyond that in the NFL draft. I'm going to assume that that's what he's saying. But either way, he's right.
Now the comment. Now you guys think Zion can't even start. I don't know how I feel about that. You don't pick guards the first round. Zion was the last no-brainer. We tried with that. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. There are plenty of guards that do just fine. Plenty of interior offensive line that do just fine in round one. Like, could he have been a miss? Sure. Time will tell. Looks like they are trying possibly to bring him in at center. But I wouldn't let Zion's, at least current failures, or not living up to the potential, deter you from going for an offensive line in round one. Like that, I don't think that at all.
First of all, I don't think that anybody is saying that Zion can't play. I think there was bigger expectations.
Well, a lot of people are saying that.
Even from me going into last year, that didn't end up coming to fruition. And I think already with Joe Ortiz talking about the possibility of having Zion play center, number one, to me, that says that he's willing to do the work to change his position to maximize his value to the team. But two, it also shows that the team still believes in him. So I don't see Zion Johnson being moved off this team. But unfortunately, there's still two interior offensive lineman positions that you need a massive upgrade on.
Running back free agents other than JK, obviously. Aaron Jones is out there. Pittsburgh kid is out there. Do you think they spend on that?
Outside of J.K. Dobbins, I do not believe that you're going to build out this roster again with free agents.
Unless it's like bottom tier.
Well,
money-wise.
Sure. But I think that J.K. Dobbins is the priority to re-sign. And with the running back class that you have in this draft, whether it's 22, 55, third round, whatever, they're going to find another running back to round out that stable.
I think I'm with you. We've got about maybe 5 minutes or so. So if you guys have any more questions or topics, we'll try to do rapid fire and try to get through as many as possible. Christopher says, Amar and Hampton round 1, Judkins round 2, Scatabo round 3.
Shout out to you, Dan. Cam Scatabo, Dan Wolkenstein's alumnus.
Of the 3, running back round 1, 2, or 3. I mean, I think that's the order in which I would want them, but
if you were only given these 3 options, is that what we're doing? If you're only given these 3 options, which one would you rather take? Is that what it is?
Yes, because I mean, it means if you took, Amar and Hampton round 1, you're not getting a Colson Loveland round 1. Or if you're doing Judkins round 2, maybe you do get Colson Loveland round.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of leaning Hampton or Judkins, honestly. I think probably Hampkins or Scatabo are probably the 2 that I would do. Because in my head, I'm thinking, all right, if I did Hampton, that I could still build out the offensive line. So we have that truck and trailer. Scatabo totally seems like a Harbaugh type. But also, all 3 of them do, to be honest. I'd be happy with any 3 of those. What would you choose?
I would not discount any of these 3. I would just add in RJ Harvey is someone who I love through the pre-draft process. You talk about just a guy that runs pissed off, pint size pissed off runner. Gotta love that. Interesting when you go back and you look at Damian Martinez out of Miami, you look at his measurables, and ironically enough, it's actually almost identical to a former Miami alumnus, Gus Edwards. just as far as size and height and where they were in college. Not trying to say as far as production, but Damian Martinez is a damn bulldozer on how he runs the ball. So I love the tape that I've watched from him. There's so many different options as it relates to running backs in this class and for what you want to do. Hampton, to me, would just he's going to give you so much as it relates to the run game. I thought Quinton Judkins had a great testing week. I thought he elevated himself. He, along with Travion Henderson, very much elevated himself. Cam Scatabo is...
Didn't do much, but what he did do was crazy.
I mean, I don't think you could talk about someone who breaks as many tackles as he does and runs as angry as he does, arguably more than maybe Ashton Genty.
Does JK getting re-signed change the archetype of running back you're after?
Maybe, because you look at, if you just were to take the sample size of what JK and Gus were outside of them previously being together in Baltimore, JK brought you more explosion, Gus was hoping you were going to bring him in for those tough yards that you needed to get. Unfortunately, that just didn't end up coming to fruition. But yes, 100%. I think if you do bring JK in, that you're going to look for either someone that has a mix of those traits or is more of the old school, grind it out, get you some tough yards type of running back. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to have any shortage of those type in this class, which is a great problem to have.
Yep. Let's see. Asante should be gone too. Jake, do you see them bringing back? We can talk about internal free agents for a sec. Do you think Asante gets re-signed?
It was such a strange situation.
What they do. Yeah.
That we were in the dark. Everybody was in the dark and could not get any information on what happened with Asante Samuel Jr. when we got that news that late in practice that week, it was leading up to the Denver Broncos game.
So weird.
That he went down and never returned. And then we got some of the details afterwards, and you realize, oh, this is not only a rare situation, but pretty serious one for Asante Samuel Jr. Mm-hmm. It essentially leaves you with Asante Samuel Jr., Christian Fulton, both being free agents. That would essentially leave your cornerback room with Cam Hart, Tarheeb Still, Jasir Taylor, Dean Leonard. We know Joe Ortiz loves his cornerbacks and has always said you can never have enough of them. I don't know if Asante ends up coming back. That just may have been unfortunate timing given everything that's happened. And he wasn't able to capitalize on what he could have had in a contract year. That one's, I really do not know on that one. Christian Fulton, on the other hand, who probably had, I know, mixed reactions to people towards the end of the year as far as his play goes, but in general for him as a player, been one of his better seasons that he's had since he's been in the NFL. And those first 4 weeks, hell, even in training camp, he was what we expected that reclamation project to turn into. So I could honestly make a case for both. One or the other, if not both of them, to come back, depending on the numbers. But you're probably only going to get one if you end up bringing a contract back. And I would probably lean towards Christian Fulton, honestly.
Yeah, I think Christian Fulton for coverage ability. And I don't think he's as well. See, the thing is, Asante's coverage is great. It's the tackling that was the issue. They have the Swiss Army knife already with Tarheeb Still and Elijah Molden, which I think that kind of makes Asante, in my opinion, kind of an odd man out. Maybe the outside guys, they got Dean Leonard, Cam Hart, so maybe Christian Fulton.
I also say that given how many injuries that you have to your secondary last year, whether it was short-term or long-term, I think that the fact that they got as far as they did, given those secondary problems, number one is a praise to Steve Klinkscale.
Yeah.
For having everybody playing the way that he did. But I think that that was a little bit of a warning shot to say, we may need to reinforce this position a little bit more. So whether it's bringing back one of your internal free agencies and then strengthening it by the draft, definitely see that happening.
Yeah. Louts of Bruin brings up an interesting topic here about the receiving market this year. Tutu got $10 million, which was like, whoa. Didn't see that coming. So this is one of those, like, there are levels to this. There's the 30 plus for a T Higgins trade or a DK Metcalf trade and extension. Then there's probably the 20-ish for Davante. And then maybe there's like a 10 to 15 for Darius Slayton. Not what we would do. But again, folks tuning in, like, what will they do? What would they probably do? It's probably Davante at most. Davante at most.
And again, then that is the biggest question mark here when you think about this, because this is two different worlds of offseason for Joe Ortiz. Because last year the Chargers were barely able to spend. They had to get their contracts in place and make some unfortunate sacrifices before free agency could even really kick off. And even still, they were hamstrung for a variety of different reasons. Now, what does Joe Ortiz do with $93 million?
And counting.
Exactly.
Yeah. Darius Slay, perhaps, a veteran who could help the rookies. I don't see it. I don't see him spending money. If he comes on the cheap, maybe, but I don't see them spending money on the secondary. They already have money spent on Elijah Molden, Derwin James, Alope Gilman. I know they're all safeties, but I think they feel good about their cornerback room with Elijah. And if they're going to get veterans, they're going to get veterans like a Christian Fulton type or some of those unks, Tony Jeffersons of the world. So, yeah. Todd says, do you think we're getting any news today, Jake?
We're 48 hours away from free agency, that negotiating window officially being open.
So legal tampering starts Monday. Is that right?
I mean, I wouldn't put it past anybody. I think you could make a case that this has been the most active free agency that the NFL has ever had before free agency even opens, with the number of trades that have happened and with surprise releases that have taken place. Normally, it's like, okay, we're waiting for that clock to hit 12 o'clock Pacific on Monday, and then the floodgates are supposed to open, go to town, and then that's when we're getting the bevy of news. You're starting to get so much news come out over this past week. Dan was still in Texas when all of this news started coming down. So normally that doesn't happen. So shit, yeah, let's get some news. Apparently everybody else is doing it. We got some yesterday as it related to Gus Edwards. Let's go.
Yeah. Louds the Bruin. I think he means Paulson Adebo cornerback, maybe. Butchering the spelling. Yes, I said that probably, 3 weeks ago, Jake? That's the guy I'm like, ooh. I liked him the same lens that I liked Elijah Molden. I could totally see that. You can get him on the cheap, probably. Christopher says this is the illegal tampering period.
Yes.
Nick predicts Monday news. Chargers sign Davante Adams.
Calling the shot Monday headlines. Is that what it is going to read?
Yes. Okay. So maybe this is the last question, Jake. Maybe you and me and folks watching, tuning in, leaving the chat comments. Let's call our shot. Let's predict. Crystal ball. Monday, all of us going to bed. Head hits the pillow. Are we smiling? Are we sweating? Are we crying? What is the Chargers news come Monday?
You're going to hate my answer. You're going to hate it.
Oh, no.
I think that you'll get some news that the Chargers are interested in said player, but you're going to go to bed hoping to God that you're going to wake up on Tuesday morning that the Chargers signed one of those players.
Which one?
I don't know. Whether it's Davante, I think you're going to get news that they're in play for whether it's Drew Dahlman, Davante, there's trade talks happening with DK. You're going to get some type of news like that. But it's kind of going to be the repetitive stuff, connecting the dots together. And then you're going to go to bed because there's been no news on Monday of like an actual signing or a trade. And you're going to hope that you wake up on Tuesday morning and looking at your phone at 5:45 in the morning.
You're not sleeping.
Hoping to God that the Chargers actually pulled something off. That's my prediction for Monday. I hate that answer. I wish that answer was different. But this is normally how the Chargers operate. It's normally how they operate. I will say this.
Well, but
I will say this, though.
Is that?
I will say that the situation with J.K. Dobbins and Khalil Mack is going to be figured out prior to Monday.
So I think I'm pretty much on board with you. I don't think they're going to be doing any tier 1 signings in terms of like those top of the market players. So whoever, interior defensive line 1 free agent, no. Wide receiver 1, no. I think that you will see them sign 1 or 2 mid to low depth value signings. And to your point, you'll still hear the things are ramping up for Davante. I think it ends up being Davante, but I don't think it happens day one. A lot of folks are saying Davante Adams and Mack on Monday, interior offensive line on Tuesday. Keenan Allen reunion, question mark? I don't think so.
I don't see it.
Hayden Hurst re-signed on a 1-year deal. Lyles Bruin says, we're going to be crying when our head hits the pillow. The wait for the second wave of free agency. Again, I don't necessarily know if I'm going to be crying. I think I'm more just going to be like twiddling thumbs, a little sweaty.
Waiting for the Schefter bomb.
Yeah, but like that's
your
kind of
notifications.
That's what I'm expecting right now, honestly. And then director comes out with a hammer. Myles Garrett on his way to LA. Bro, if that happened, one, Jesse Minter is going to be like just cruising to his first head coaching opportunity next year. But again, like you're going to have to give a shit ton for that.
Yeah. I honestly don't think that the Myles Garrett situation is going to be resolved anytime soon, whether that's him being traded away or him staying in Cleveland. There's a lot of mending fences just to come to the agreement table. Hell, the damn owner won't even meet with Myles Garrett when he requests for it. There's a lot more problems going on in Cleveland.
Yeah. And Kansas City at this point. Do you think Xavier Worthy plays next year? That's serious.
I mean, that's
serious.
That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. I won't make my predictions because, there's been previous situations like that where you thought a suspension was coming down that year. It didn't end up happening. So, look, I will say this. That is a very unfortunate and scary situation for a guy who just started off his NFL career. And whatever comes of it, I hope that something is corrected for him because that is a bad situation to get into.
Yes. I predict the Chiefs will go wide receiver in round 1 or 2 again because of this. I think we're at the end of this, Jake. Any other we went through like 47 topics in this episode, but Jake, anything else we wanted to get to before we sign off today?
This was a good show, Dan, to come back to, honestly. We're right here, right before the brink of free agency is about to start. There's still so much hype as it relates to the NFL draft, and that's only going to build and build and build here over the next couple of weeks. I know that for what we have set up, it's now going to start transitioning into the fun stuff of the NFL draft when Dan and I, we try to do as much of our offseason roster construction as possible, and that gave a little bit of a tease when you add a little bit of the draft priority into it. But now we get into the thing that people like the most, and that's top 10 lists. When we really get into the weeds as it relates to these draft prospects. So that's obviously coming down the pipe here very soon. Special guests are coming down the pipe very soon. Lots to be excited about over these next several weeks as we all put eyes for April 24th. So good show on Saturday. Hopefully we can see you guys much sooner than we did to doing this show. Thanks, Wolkenstein. Great show today. Appreciate everybody that joined. Always, 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 Dan and I enjoy all of this banter and conversation with all of you. Don't stop coming in here because we always give a live show to you guys. You drive the topics. You drive the conversation. Love just talking football in general.
Yeah, this one was fun. Big love from the director. Big love from us as well. This was a great show, and it's good to get back as we get into the frenzy. We'll have a ton this week as we get into each of those day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the signings. As we get more towards the NFL draft, we'll get into our position breakdowns. We're finally get into those. I'm excited about that. Chargers Unleashed hotline is always live, 323-902-7586. Always leave a voicemail with your thoughts, questions, predictions, feelings, whatever, and we'll do our best to sprinkle them in throughout the upcoming shows. Brace for it, Chargers fans. We are mere hours away from free agent frenzy, and this Chargers team is going to look a hell of a lot different a week from today. Chargers have upwards of close to $100 million to spend, top 3 in the NFL, and it might get bigger than that. For Jake, I'm Dan. This is Chargers Unleashed. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you next time on Chargers Unleashed. Enjoy the weekend. Talk soon, fam.